Hi, Roger again with Initial Ascent, and in this video I'm going to go over the tourniquets that I have here in front of me and pros and cons to each one of them and how to apply a tourniquet to yourself. So a lot of people don't carry tourniquets out there. They think that they're going to be able to take their belt off and grab a stick and fashion some type of a tourniquet when something happens to them. In all reality, you have 90 seconds, 120 seconds to get a tourniquet on and get the blood stopped before you end up dying. And they say minimum 4 inches above the wound to place a tourniquet, or when all else fails, when in doubt, go high and tight. So go as high as you can up on the extremity, whether it's your leg or your arm, and apply that tourniquet as high as you can. Make sure you remove all the stuff that's out of your pockets, whether it's keys or a cell phone or anything like that, because the tourniquet's not going to work, and put enough pressure on that artery to stop the bleeding. It's going to hurt. It's not going to feel good. And with these different types of tourniquets, the wider the pressure, the least amount of pressure needed, which is it's going to feel better. So a narrow tourniquet like this Rat's tourniquet, it's probably going to hurt more than a wider tourniquet, the soft T wide, but really in the grand scheme of things, you're trying to stop the blood so you don't die. So a little bit of pain I think you can deal with. So once you get that tourniquet on high and tight, check it, make sure all the bleeding is stopped. If it hasn't stopped, that's why I carry a second tourniquet. You can put another tourniquet just below that and see if that can stop all the bleeding. Once you got the bleeding stopped, then again, I would put a pressure dressing on. If it's a big enough hole, stuffing it full of combat gauze or some type of a hemostatic agent is going to be better. Stop that bleeding, and then put a pressure dressing around it, and obviously then get on your InReach and ask for help. There's plenty of instances out there. Tim Wells from Relentless Pursuit was in Africa, I believe, and he was spear hunting in Africa, got down because he dropped something and a spear came out of a tree and it hit him in the leg. And he had his GoPro down there, so he was almost filming his death in Africa on the ground. All his communication was up in a tree and he couldn't get a hold of anybody, and he was putting pressure on his leg, trying not to pass out, because if he passed out, he would have bled to death. He ended up surviving, thankfully, but that's an instance where you got a bino harness with a tourniquet on there. You could have stopped that blood loss right away. And so some of these tourniquets here they're not a comprehensive collection of what's out there on the market, but these are some of the ones that I carry personally, and I'm going to tell you why. So this tourniquet here, it's a ratcheting tourniquet. It's a very low profile, lightweight system that you can carry that doesn't take up a whole lot of room in your pack, packs down really thin, and it's really simple to use. So it's a ratcheting type of a tourniquet, and you end up putting it on the extremity at least 4 inches above the wound, or high and tight, tightening it down. This is a friction lock system, so sometimes it could be a little bit harder to apply onto an upper limb, your arms yourself, but they have this tab here that you could bite onto and pull tight if you needed to. Tighten that friction lock, and then you end up using this ratchet system, tighten it down until the bleeding stops. And it's a pretty wide tourniquet. They make different models, but it's something a lot of our SWAT guys carry in my department right now, and something that's kind of new to me, but it's been something that's been nice to carry in my bag. Next one is kind of been a tried and true tourniquets, the CAT tourniquets, the Generation 7 tourniquet. This is actually one that I carried on patrol for a while before it ended up in my bag. You just got to be careful with a lot of these, especially if they're exposed to the sun. This is called a windlass, and this is a plastic piece, and sometimes it can be degraded by the sun, so do what you can to keep that out of the sun. But this one's basically, it's a Velcro system, just a real simple. This one's easier to apply onto your person, and what's really important, a lot of these tourniquets have to be staged in a certain way. So you want to be able to stage these tourniquets to where you can open them up quickly, get them onto a limb, and be able to get to them and get them to work. This one the Velcro system. Again, high and tight. Velcro around. Tighten down this windlass. And then there's a windlass lock here. And then you take this little strap and put it across. And that keeps the windlass in there when it's tight. This one, both of these last two tourniquets are a really rigid system, which aren't very good for children or small adults. As you can see here, it's flexible, but it's hard to get that around a child's arm and really get the tension down. That's about as tight as you're going to get it. And so if you get smaller adults or children, these ones don't work very well for them. Same with this cat tourniquet. This is a Gen 7, like I said. This one is hard to do on children also. Because of this hard plastic piece, it's hard to get that tension down that you need to stop the bleeding on a child, and also on pets too. This is a soft T wide tourniquet. I have it set up with a rubber band on here, but it's easy to grab that rubber band, grab there, pull that apart. This is another friction lock type of a system here. It doesn't have Velcro on it, so it friction locks. But the nice thing about this one is it's got a kind of a quick disconnect buckle here. So if you had to put it around a leg, you didn't have to try to slip it around your whole leg. You can just unclip that buckle, pull it apart, clip it back again, friction lock down. This is a metal windlass, so it's a little bit easier to really wrench down on it. Same thing, twist around until the bleeding stops, and then it locks in right there. This is a little bit older one. They got some updated ones now out on the market, but there's that one. This one's a SWAT tourniquet. It's a stretch, wrap, and tuck is what SWAT stands for. Basically, it's a big elastic band. They got instructions on all the sections on this thing. The nice thing about this is you can put it on dogs, you can put it on kids, because it's just a big rubber band. But it's a lot harder to do on yourself, especially an upper arm. On a leg, it's not that bad. Basically, pull it tight, stretch it around as tight as you can, and then you'll end up tucking it under itself, and that's what's going to hold the pressure. It's a little bit harder to keep the pressure on it, but because it's elastic, it'll move with you. A lot of times with traumas like that, blood's going to rush to it right away. It's going to swell. So you get a tourniquet on, so especially some of these ones that are just bands that you have to tighten down. That's why you're supposed to check the tension on your tourniquet, because it swells. You put the tourniquet on, and then pretty soon your body's going to try to take all the blood away from there and put it into your core as a fight or flight response. So it's going to end up shrinking again, and if you don't pay attention to your tourniquet, it could come loose, especially if you're trying to walk out of an area. Which these ones are nice because they're going to kind of give with your body, but again, it's harder. You got to watch these ones because they can wiggle loose, because all it's keeping it under there is the tuck. Next one, it's called the Rats tourniquet. This is one I actually borrowed from one of our SWAT guys at work, but it's a pretty neat little system. It's just an elastic band. This is a Generation 1. The Generation 2 has a couple upgrades. I believe it's a little bit longer, but basically it's got a slot in here that you'll end up putting the tail end of this through, but you keep about 3 fingers of a gap in there. You'll end up putting one loop through that, and it's easy to apply to yourself. Pull it tight, and then you just wrap around your arm and then stick it into that slot, and it holds it. As you can see, that was pretty quick. It doesn't feel very good because of the surface area that this thing has. It's pretty small, so the more pressure is going to be on one spot. You can see it's kind of hard to get off. There it goes. But that's a system I can already feel the blood stopping on my arm. But it's a pretty easy system to use. It's really lightweight. It's really minimalistic. It's probably one of those ones that you hear, life or limb. out there when it comes to tourniquets. Some of these ones, and it used to be where people were afraid that if you put a tourniquet on, you're going to lose your limb if you don't get the tourniquet off in a couple hours. But this is all the combat casualty stuff that we've been seeing with some of these recent wars, is you can keep a tourniquet on for an extended period of time and still not lose an arm or a limb. So, but the ones that are a little bit thinner, that have less surface area, you're going to end up running into more of that tissue damage because you're getting this thing on and you're crushing the tissue that's around there to get the bleeding to stop. So it's just something to think about. But this one also is easier to put on children because of the really infinite adjustability of that band. But that's about it for this video. I highly suggest people get some tourniquets, practice with them. Don't practice with the ones that you're going to carry, because these rubber band ones aren't that bad, but these the cat tourniquets and the soft T wides, if you really crank down on some of these, you can end up damaging them, and you don't want to do that on the tourniquet that you're going to carry out into the field. But get some training, be safe, and good luck.